Hi, people. I wanted to talk about how easy it is to achieve continuous deployment in serverless applications. Also, give a shout out to my friend Yanchui. I've been going through his course, and Yanchui, if you don't know him, he is basically what Kent Dodds is to React. That's Yanchui to AWS. And he's got a few courses, and I think this would be his complete package. So I'm going through one of them. It's AppSync, so that's a GraphQL API, and you're creating a Twitter clone. And I recently finished going through the backend portion of the code, so it's using serverless frameworks. It's in JavaScript, and his courses are so thorough that he takes you all the way from creating your lambdas, serverless configuration, all the way to unit testing, integration testing, end-to-end testing, and CI/CD. So I took some of that and iterated on it and realized, hey, it's actually very, very easy to achieve continuous deployment on your branches than to your deployments. So he has a very informative blog post about why you should use temporary stacks when you're doing serverless. Basically, what this means is I have a PR, right? I'm a developer, I'm an individual developer. I have a PR, and my entire stack, I am going to just deploy into my um, custom stack, basically. And usually the convention is to name the stack after your PR, and then you have just a stack for that PR, right? And then, of course, you have a stack for your dev, staging, production, and all those things. But the key is not only every developer has their own quote unquote sandbox, every PR has its own sandbox. So I think that is just fantastic. And I'll just show you how it can be done in practice. So this is the backend repository. And here are a few things that you can do. So in order to deploy your stack, it's just npm run deploy, and it just runs serverless deploy in the background. It takes a few minutes. I'm not going to show you that locally because I'm going to show you in CI. We have some environment variables that we get from our stack. Those allow us to run end-to-end tests, and they all go to your .env file. And that is your npm test lint format. When you're working on a branch, though, it's a little more interesting, right? So instead of just npm run deploy, you give it the stack modifier and then the name of your stack. So this could be anything. I just gave an example of tmp temp in here. Again, you have the step of exporting the environment variables like usual, and then testing. And then you have the ability to destroy the branch. So how does this apply? If you have a branch, you just deploy it, you run your test against it, and then at the end of the PR, you remove it. So let's start simple and look at these three YAML files. So most of the time, I think these are going to be enough. You have one for PRs, one for dev, which runs on main or master, and then one for stage, which runs when you tag things. And maybe you have a prod, and that would also be similar. But I'll do a diff side by side, and we'll see how simple those are. So I'll just take a high level view. So this one only runs on main, so it will run on that. And let's see, we have some environment variables. Okay, we check it out. This is installing Python is so that we can install AWS CLI, and we need that for Serverless Framework. npm CI is your usual npm install button CI, basically. Now deploying to dev, right? That is the serverless magic, and I made it as brief as it could be, right? So all you do is npm run, and then you have to do this with Serverless Framework so that you can run certain serverless commands. So you have to get authenticated, basically. But then all you do is SLS run deploy, and that just deploys your stack into your default deployment. I think in my case that's dev. And then right after that, we run tests. So we have ingest, by the way. All kinds of tests are ingest. This isn't how I would do it usually, like unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests in their own folder. I would usually have it next to the files. But this way, it gives a nice segregation of the test types. Um, and end-to-end tests with Jest versus, like, for instance, maybe Cypress, maybe that's a case study for later. And that's definitely going to be interesting. But in this case, We're just doing testing. And since we have end-to-end tests, we want to have things deployed. Um, this command export m will get our environment variable so that end-to-end tests can work reliably. And thanks to that, right, each deployment like dev, stage, or your PR has its own environment variables, and you don't have to deal with any of that overhead. All you need is your AWS access key and secret key, right? And then you just run your test. So it's that simple. You deploy, you get some environment variables so that your test can use it, and then you run your test. That's all it is. So let's take a look at what is the difference in staging, for instance, right? So let's close this, select these two together, compare selected. So instead of the main branch, we run the stage job on tags. And instead of the default dev deployment, so that is just npm run deploy, what we do is we add the stack modifier and we call it stage and export environment stage. So this is again the environment. So we basically populate this env file, and that's slightly different for stage, which that isn't really important, but the script isn't package.json. So it's that simple. Dev it needs stage. Now we can get a clue from here that our stack name is stage, right? So what is it going to be in the case of a PI, which is the biggest problem, right? So usually what happens is teams, let's say you have so like 20 teams, right? Each team of five, they share the dev deployment, right? But how do they work on PRs? In our case, um, teams share, like teams of five, let's say, they share one environment. So that is still shared mutable state, and they keep having to deploy to that environment. So there are plenty of solutions trying to tackle that. So one of them is local development. Of course, you have local stack, you have dev zero. One of them is ephemeral instances. So what serverless framework does is kind of like that, but it just makes it so simple. It's just npm run SLS deploy, and then your stack name. That I think that's mind blowing, right? How they made that simple. See PR versus dev. If we take a look at that, so instead of main, this runs on any pull request, right? And here is some of the cool parts. So this action, this GitHub action, gets your branch name. So I want to, instead of deploying to dev, I want to deploy to my PR, basically my stack, and my stack and PR will have the same name. So instead of just SLS deploy or stage string, we get the branch name using our GitHub action, and it's that simple. So if my branch name is TMP temp, that's just going to insert that here. And then when CSLS deploy EME, again, the same environment deploy. So this is like a longer version of that. So actually what this script is doing is exporting, it's doing something specific to this repository, which doesn't really matter. But the idea is that you just replace the default dev with the value of your branch. And then the testing is the simple, also the same thing. The PRs, as an extra, at the end, they remove the stack. I really like this because now you don't have dead stacks out there. And at the end of the PR, if your tests have worked, it just removes a stack. There's a case of, let's say, although all my tests pass, it might not push the PR. Maybe I want to continue work with my branch. Well, that's easy too. All you have to do is just deploy it one more time. It takes about a minute, right? And then SLS deploy as your branch name. You can continue working like that. I try to make all of this work so that when something is merged to dev, your most recent PR name, you acquire that, and then you destroy that serverless stack. But I couldn't complete that. And in the absence of that, I think removing your PRs when everything works is okay for now. Anyway, so here is your easy mode CI/CD in the serverless app. Every PR has its own stack. You deploy it as you run the pipeline, and then you remove it after you run your test. And it is as neat as just this job. So again, we see you install CLI, you get your branch name, and then that is very neat. And you once you get the branch name, let's say it's TM2 at this point, you do your SLS deploy, and that takes this one took 4 minutes. It might take less. It might sometimes take a minute or 2 minutes. It depends. Tests take about a minute, and then you remove it. So removing also takes looks like it's 1 minute. No parallelization in this job. So if you look at the summary, I think 7 minutes. I think we could do some performance improvements, right? But I think this is one of those extreme cases that the deploy took quite long. Usually, deploy isn't going to take 4 minutes. I think it can also take 1 minute. Let me just try and run. That's a nice big, yeah. See, yeah, I don't think it's always taking 4 minutes, but as your stack grows, it may. And I don't know if there's a very good solution to that. Because on the mirror side with the UI application, we just serve the UI application in the CI and then test against it. And then a serverless framework setting, we deploy our stack unique to our PR, test against it, and at the end of the PR, we remove it. Well, that's all. I think this was something I just want to give a shout out to Jan and talk about how easy it is to do continuous deployment with your PRs and uh, your dev and stage and show how it can all work. So the repo name is AppSync Masterclass. I think what I'll do next is work on the front end and then there's some refinements like going to the back end. That's the course. These courses are very thorough, so it takes a long time to finish everything. But maybe at some point, what we could do is take these end-to-end tests and see how they look with Cypress. That's always interesting and lets you relate to what developers are thinking and what their experiences with what they've been used to versus Cypress. So stay tuned for that one at a later time. Thanks. Bye.